Hello, how's everybody doing this morning? This is Rich Harshaw, and we're here for our unusual day, Friday webinar. And this is our quarterly book review, and we're actually going to do a 2-for-1 today. We're going to do, as you see on your screen right now, the E-Myth Revisited. I'm not quite sure why it's revisited. I think the revisited version has been around forever. Maybe there was a previous version that I wasn't aware of. But anyway, why most small businesses don't work and what to do about it. And we're also going to talk about the 4-hour work week. These are two books that have been influential in my thinking and the things that I've done with my business and that I'm currently doing with my business, and hopefully can find some things that will be helpful for you in your business. I see that we've got quite a few of our members on, some of which I know personally and are small business owners. So hopefully this will be of some value to you. The reason I chose to put these two books together is because even though they come from a very different vantage point and a different angle, and I think both vantage points have validity depending on who you are and what you're trying to accomplish, I think that they're really sort of striving at a similar type of goal. And that goal is to have a business that works for you, that allows you the freedom to do the things that you want to do, that makes you the money that you want to make, and does not consume you as you try to run it and manage it for the next 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 years. So we're going to start with the E-Myth, and I'm going to just kind of go through some of the major principles with you. And I'm not going to cover the entire book for either of these. In fact, I've chosen very specifically on the E-Myth Revisited not to cover the second half of the book, which gets into some of the nuts and bolts of how to achieve the goals that are set out in the first half of the book. I do want to cover the first half of the book, which talks about some of the problems that entrepreneurs have, some of the problems that are associated with growing businesses, and what the solutions, generally speaking, look like. Again, I'm not going to get into a lot of the nuts and bolts of, well, how do we implement and make those changes happen. I really just want this to be more of a definition kind of a scenario. So we're going to go through that. Then we're going to switch over to the 4-hour work week. And Tim Ferriss, the author of 4-Hour Work Week, has got a very different perspective. He espouses creating a completely different kind of business than the E-Myth does. The E-Myth talks about starting any kind of a business and having an ability to grow whatever business you want into a business that works for you, whereas Tim Ferriss, the E-Myth, he talks about starting businesses that require essentially no employees, no overhead, and very little work. I think there's merit to that kind of business. The reality is that the majority of the people on this call are not in those kinds of businesses. You're already in more of a traditional business. But I think he's got some interesting perspective and some things that can really help out a lot as you grow your traditional business. So we'll try to dovetail these two things together. So let's go ahead and get started with the E-Myth Revisited. And let me make sure that everything's working over here on the old console. Okay. Whoops. And let's talk about the entrepreneurial seizure. This is what Michael Gerber, the author of the E-Myth, talks about, is that moment in time when everybody that has a job has the feeling very strongly that, you know what, this is something that I could be doing myself. My boss is an idiot. They don't pay me jack, and I can do the work better than the boss can. And why don't I just fire the boss and start my own company? This is how businesses start. We see it all the time. And I think in the last 20 years, this has really accelerated. When I got out of college in 1993, which has been just right at 20 years ago in April, I remember my father-in-law asking me, what do you want to do for a living? What are your plans? What are your specific plans? Not just, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, I really want to start my own marketing company. I want to have my own business. And, man, I'll tell you what, he about had a heart attack. Hang on one second. Excuse me. Sorry, sneeze there. He about had a heart attack. He had been a company man his whole life, had risen through the ranks, started out as an overnight graveyard shift worker in a cheese factory, worked his way up through the ranks, became a CEO of a food company, and did many great things in his career. So that was his paradigm. And this is going back to the 1990s when he was at the height of his game. in the corporate world. And he looked at me as wanting to start my own business as sort of a kind of a weird thing. And there were a lot of people obviously starting businesses back in those days, the 80s, 70s, 90s, but not like it is now. I mean, I've seen attitudes shift. Well, here's what happened in my situation. I did start my own business. I grew it. It became quite successful in the late 90s and the early 2000s. It's been well documented with some of you who know me well that things did not go well in the middle 2000s and have since recovered nicely. But interestingly, my father-in-law had an experience where he got corporate politicked out of a job and subsequently started his own business. And it was funny because 10, 15 years after I had married his daughter, his attitude was very, very different than it had been when I'd first gotten married, which was, hey, having your own business is the way to go. You've got to have your own business if you want to get by in this world, as if he had completely forgotten that previous advice he had given me. But anyway, the entrepreneurial seizure does hit. It hits a lot of people, probably most of you who are on this call. And, well, let's take a look. Let's take a look at what the E-myth is. The book title is the E-myth. What is the E-myth? The entrepreneurial myth. The E stands for entrepreneurial. Here's what the myth is. Most businesses are not started by entrepreneurs. They're started by technicians, people who are skilled at what they enjoy doing and who want to work for themselves instead of somebody else. The technician, okay? So the guy who is an accountant decides he wants to quit his job and start his own accounting firm. He is a technician of accounting. Maybe somebody who works for a marketing company decides they want to go on their own. Their technical work is doing marketing. Or maybe somebody who is a baker and decides they want to start their own bakery. Don't get caught up on the word technician having to do with technology or fixing things like we typically think of the word technician. Think of it as somebody who does the work, the output of a given business. A doctor who works for a practice is a technician of doing doctor work. So the E-myth is that most people who start businesses are not entrepreneurs, even though that's what we like to think. Oh, he started out on his own. He's risking it all. He's an entrepreneur. In reality, it's not. It's a technician. And really what they're doing is buying themselves a job. People get frustrated by their boss, the limitations imposed on them, the pay. They want to fire their boss, make more money, have more freedom by doing it themselves. Well, here's the fatal error according to the book. Fatal error is that technicians assume that because they understand the technical work for the business or of the business, they understand how a technical business works. Now, I'm probably talking to a lot of people that already know this because you've lived this, but there is definitely a big difference between knowing how to do the work and understanding how the business works. I was doing a seminar yesterday for remodelers, and if you've been through one of my remodeling seminars, you've heard me have this discussion before. I say there's really 6 major skill sets that you've got to have to successfully run a remodeling company, and this is true for other kinds of companies as well. The first one is sales. The second one is sales management, managing those salespeople. It's a big part of the home improvement company. Then there's the operations, the financial side, the production side, and the marketing side of things. And we could probably split some hairs and find some other areas of the business, but those are the 6 major ones: sales, sales management, financial, operations, production, and marketing. And I asked the group, where did most of you come out of? And in that particular industry, most of the people come out of either the sales side of it. You say, well, that's not being a technician. Well, in reality, it is the technical work of selling, okay, to use that term very broadly. And the other area that people come out of in that industry is production. And if you come out of production and you start your own company, there's probably gaping holes in your understanding of marketing, finance, production. Well, if you came from production, not production, but in operations, sales, sales management, and this is going to be a huge problem. If you assume that you know how to install siding, then therefore you know how to run a siding company, it's the fatal flaw. And this is why businesses fail, because people start these businesses, they find out that they're over their head, they're good at the technical work, but they stink at everything else. They're 2 different issues, and if you blur those differences, that's the fatal error. Business building skills are more important than just production. The technician will then quickly become overwhelmed, they become frustrated, they can become burned out, and they quit. or they go through some other cycles of the business that we'll talk about here in just a second. So let's talk about the 3 skill sets that are needed to run a business successfully. The first one is the entrepreneur. This is the person that supplies the vision. Dreamers that focus on the future. These are entrepreneurs. Managers, people that supply the order and systems. They're pragmatic. They focus on the past and cling to the status quo. Now, these are broad statements. Don't take this as everything is being exactly 100% this way, but this is generally what we find. And then, of course, the technician who supplies the actual output. These are the doers. These are the people that are hands-on. They like to get things done. The problem is that all 3 of these people want to be the boss, but none of them want to have a boss. But all 3 skill sets are required. Now, I can tell you from a lot of experience that if the person running the company focuses too much on any one of these areas, you're going to have a really messed up business. When I started my company years and years ago, there was 2 of us that were partners. One of us was the entrepreneur, and it was not me, it was my partner. He was the one that had the vision. It was not that I lacked vision and had no vision, it's that that was his real forte. I was also the manager, and I was very heavily the technician. I was actually writing the marketing and doing the work, doing a lot of the client management. So we had 2 partners that were doing these 2 things. Well, as our business grew, the entrepreneur became an entrepreneur. He continued to be an entrepreneur. He continued to supply the vision, but he never really understood the management. But he thought he understood the management, and as a result, managed the business into the ground. Now, there's a lot of details in that story that I didn't just give you, but I'm telling you, if you've got somebody who's extraordinarily entrepreneurial but has no ability to manage or get things done, you're going to have a business that's going to grow, 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 and then it's going to crash, crash, crash because there's no systems in place to actually do the work or to manage the people that are doing the work, and it's going to be a disaster, okay? So here's what we've got to do. We've got to find a business that has all 3. Now, what you've got to do, first of all, is you've got to identify where in your business you have come from so that you can focus on getting the other skill sets developed in the company. Were you an entrepreneur from the very beginning with all vision, all vision, all vision? Or were you a manager, somebody that liked to orderly, neatly place things and manage things? Or were you the technician? Probably most of you who started your own business came out of the world of being a technician, okay? So let's talk about the 3 phases of growth. And let me see, I've written myself some notes here. I want to make sure that I cover everything that I wanted to cover. Let's see. Okay, yeah, let's go to the 3 phases of growth. The first is infancy, where the technician is the business. The guy starts his own restaurant because he's a cook, and he runs that business himself, or the remodeling contractor that quits and starts selling the jobs, installing the jobs, managing the jobs, and everything else himself. Then there's expansion, where management skills become required, and then maturity, where entrepreneurial perspective is required. Okay, now, here's the issue with this. In infancy, like I said, the technician is the business. If you remove the technician from the business at that level, then the business itself is gone. It disappears. The technician does everything for himself or herself. Infancy ends when the technician gets sick of juggling everything and realizes that something's got to change to move the business forward and to progress it. If the technician is not willing to make those changes, then the business is going to close. Now, if it doesn't close, if the business owner is willing to make those changes, then it moves into adolescence, or what we'll call here on this screen, expansion. Now, here's what we know. All business owners have a comfort zone, responsibilities that they feel comfortable personally delivering on. So for a technician, it's how much work a technician can output. For a manager, it's how many people that can be managed. For an entrepreneur, it's how many people they can get to buy into their vision. But for a business to grow, the business owner has got to get out of the comfort zone. And there's 4 responses that a business owner might have to the expansion phase. So things start to grow, things start to get out of the comfort zone of the business owner, and one of four likely scenarios will unfold. Number one is the business owner will say, to heck with this, I can't do it, and they'll get their business to a smaller place again. So effectively taking their business back to infancy when it was easier to run, fewer customers, and less money, of course, and they sort of let their dream get crushed. And you know what, this is, in reality, this is the natural inclination for most technicians who turn into owners. They start to grow, they find that they can't manage it all, there's no vision for the company, so they decide, well, I'll just get small again. We see this a lot in home improvement companies. We see guys that have $1 million in sales. Now, that sounds kind of like a lot, but on $1 million in sales, depending on how that business is run, there may not be that much profit in it for the owner. And when they find that trying to get to $2 million proves unwieldy, they say, well, you know, I'll just sell my own deals, I'll get them installed, and I'll make the same money with less hassle, less management, less effort. But the problem with that is it starts to crush your spirits after a while, and this is a business that very likely fails. So the second kind of response to an expanding business, instead of getting small again, the owner will do what Michael Gerber calls go for broke. And that's where they take this attitude, well, we'll grow the business as much as we can, and we'll try to buy out of cash flow the resources necessary to control and manage this business. And it's called go for broke because you've got this fine line between growth and the ability to manage it. And if you outstrip your ability to manage it, if your cash flow isn't quite enough, then the business can very quickly implode because you've got unhappy customers, things are happening that are not positive, and this is pretty dangerous, actually. Another way that businesses will deal with expansion, now again, expansion is when the business hits the uncomfortable zone where the owner is not comfortable doing things that need to be done to control the business. The third way, first way was getting small again, the second way is going for broke. The third way is just simply hanging in there and hoping that something will happen over time that will make the business become more palatable. And that leads to burnout, and that almost never works. The fourth way that a business owner can deal with expansion is to bring the business into the third stage, which is maturity. Okay, being willing to learn new skills, assume different priorities for the business and for the business owner's time. Okay, so this is really where you're trying to get your business, is into maturity. Okay, so maturity is when, excuse me, is when a business has a realistic sense of how it got to where it currently is and an accurate understanding of what has to be done now to move it where it wants to go in the future. Okay, hang on. Man, I don't know what the problem is today. Hay fever season's over. So the businesses that are mature are the ones that also have a better chance of being successful. Okay, so in a mature business, they're not just concerned with the output, but here's some of the key issues. Okay, by way of list. Number one, they're concerned with how the business works rather than what work has to be done by the business. How the business will generate profits, not just sales revenues. A mature business is concerned about where it is headed in the future rather than how the present can be duplicated many times over. Mature business operates as a total entity rather than what each part of the business does, and it has a vision for the future of the business. Okay, so to get to this level, a company has to start to focus more and more on the customers that they service and what those customers need, as opposed to what it is that they do or that they want to do. And I'll tell you, it's been an interesting transition for us in our business as we try to take our business from adolescence and expansion into maturity. And you know, we still struggle with this, and we're working on it right now. And if you're our customers, you'll start to see things that are more and more indicative of a mature business. Again, we're growing just like you. But interestingly enough, we took our business from one that offered consulting services and training services, which we like to do because we're good at it, and we looked at our customers and said, well, what do they really need? And what we found that they really needed is they needed different kinds of marketing services. And our company has transformed into probably 70% of the output of our business is now internet marketing and website related. And it's really interesting because we don't think of ourselves as an internet marketing or a website type of a company. We look at ourselves as a company that does marketing that happens to put output in those areas because that's where our customers need it. And I think it's a good example of going where the customers need you to go instead of strictly and stubbornly focusing on, well, what is it that we want to do? Well, we don't want to make websites because we're not a website company. Well, then that's not servicing what our customers need. Think about that in terms of your customers. Okay? So that being said, the solution is what Michael Gerber calls the turnkey solution, or what he calls the franchise perspective. Okay? So this is what he calls the business format franchise. And he talks about in the book how in days gone by there was something called a service name franchise. And this is what you have traditionally seen with auto dealerships and companies like Coca-Cola, where they would license their name in a name licensing type of a right to a small business to take their name and their brand and to have access to it. And it started with McDonald's, the business format franchise, where the business looked at itself and it said, you know, it's not really so much that we sell hamburgers and French fries in McDonald's case. The success of the business had to do with how the business was run, not with the product that the business sold. Now, naturally, there's always a product or service that's being sold by the business, but the focus is how does the business run? And this is what Michael Gerber, the author, calls the business format franchise. And his recommendation is that you look at your business as a franchise. Now, not a franchise in necessarily the concept that you think of, like a McDonald's, where you literally have multiple locations run by small business owners using your systems. If you went that route, that's fine, but even if you don't, he's talking about creating a business that has systems in place that allows the business to operate identically and without tons of oversight from you as the owner, okay? So if you think about McDonald's as the franchise, just a couple of examples from my own observation of how a McDonald's run that are kind of interesting. If you go into a McDonald's and you look at the French fry machine, there's no dial on it to turn the temperature to the right or the wrong temperature. There's only one temperature setting, which is the right temperature setting for the French fries. And when they cook the French fries, there's a bell that dings that tells them to take it out. It's not left to the discretion of the cook to figure out those kinds of things. There's even an interesting thing. Notice this next time you go to a McDonald's or a similar kind of a restaurant. On the side of the cup that they serve you soda in, there is a line towards the bottom and a line towards the top that tells the person who's filling the cup with ice how much ice to put in the cup. Make sure it's above the bottom line and below the top line. Everything is systematized. Nothing is left to chance. And what Michael Gerber is suggesting is that, like that franchise-type business, or what he calls the business format franchise, you look at your business and attempt to systematize pretty much everything. So to have a turnkey business, it has to deliver consistent value, exceed the expectations of your customers, operable by lower skill set people. Now, here's what that means. It doesn't mean that it's operated by a bunch of idiots. It means that it's operated by people that are not necessarily as high of a skill set as the owner, okay? And this is where a lot of business owners get tripped up, is that if the output isn't identical to what the owner can output, then the disappointment and frustration sets in. But what we're looking for is not necessarily the highest quality imaginable, but rather a consistently deliverable, acceptable quality. So take a look at McDonald's. Is it the highest quality hamburger in the world? Most people would probably say no, but it's consistently the same from restaurant to restaurant. You say, well, okay, that's great, but that's still a crummy output. Well, just keep going up the ladder, okay? Go up the ladder of restaurants. So let's go up the ladder to a casual dining restaurant, like maybe Chili's. Now, I think we would mostly agree that while Chili's is not the greatest restaurant on the planet Earth, when you compare it to McDonald's, it's definitely a step ahead. Well, guess what? It's exactly the same thing. It's systematized to where everything always runs the same. There's a set of rules. People follow them. And if you go to Chili's in Grapevine, Texas, near where I live, or if you go to Chili's in Taipei, Taiwan, where I've been as of a couple years ago, guess what? You get exactly the same experience. It doesn't change, even over continents. You say, well, okay, but still, that's not the highest quality possible. Well, you just have to decide what part of the marketplace you want to serve. So let's take it up to, I don't know, Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. It's run exactly the same way in Tokyo as it is in Chicago. And it's based on this business format franchise. And this is what you're aiming for. And you know what? You say, well, even that's not the highest quality. Well, I'll tell you what the highest quality restaurant that I know is. It's a steakhouse in Dallas called Del Frisco's. You're going to drop a lot of money there. And you say, well, no, you could probably go to even higher quality than that. But you know, we're getting really kind of stupid in that conversation. It's high quality, it's expensive, and even that business over the last several years has been franchised, where they've taken the way that they do that business and they've opened locations in, I don't know, something like 12 or 15 cities across the country, Del Frisco's. It can be done on any level. You can serve McDonald's hamburgers, or you can serve Del Frisco's finest steaks. It doesn't matter. What matters is that the business format is franchisable by delivering consistent value, like it says on the screen, offerable by lower skill set people. Totally orderly, a system for everything. All systems are formally documented, deliver uniform service that is predictable, consistency in look, feel, color, and appearance. This is the business format franchise. And this is what Michael Gerber in the book, The E-Myth, is asking us or counseling us to do. Now, he goes into another section called the business development process, where he talks about innovation, quantification, and orchestration, and then a business development process that has 7 steps: the primary aim, the strategic objective, the organizational strategy, management strategy, people strategy, marketing strategy, system strategy. And there's some good information in there. My eyes glazed over a little bit on some of it, but I think in general it's good. But I think this main concept is what I really want you to take out of this book, is the idea of developing your business into a franchisable model that does not depend on you to be there for it to run properly, okay? Now, with that being said, let's go to the sort of the capper statement. And this is what Michael Gerber says all the time. Work on your business, not in your business. That's what he wants you to do. Work on your business, not in your business. And I'm telling you, I know this for a fact. It's hard to do this, especially when you're the rainmaker and you're the one that's started it and you've got things that you like to do a certain way. It's easy to work in your business instead of working on it and getting it so it's replicatable and producing a predictable result. If you work on your business, not in your business, then you need to address these questions. How can the business be set up to be effective when you're not there? Now, this is going to get into a discussion that we're going to have with Tim Ferriss here in a minute with the 4-hour work week, is running business when you're not there, or having minimal time commitment to your business. How can you set up the business to be effective when you're not there? And look at some of the most successful businesses. You may be familiar that I wrote a story, an article a few years ago called "I Want to Punch Christine Cook in the Face," and it was an article about a mattress chain here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area called Sleep Experts, run by Christine Cook. And believe it or not, I actually bought a mattress from them last November, I didn't like it, so I returned it because they have a love it or return it guarantee. I got a new mattress. The new mattress actually hurt my back after a few months. It started off nicely for about 3 months, but then it started to hurt my back. So I went back again, and I exchanged it one more time. And when the guy delivered it out to my house, this was just earlier this week, I was talking to the delivery guy, and he said, man, this Memorial Day sale we've had has been the biggest sale in the history of our company. I said, really? He said, yeah, I've got 3 more deliveries today, and then I'm off for 3 days. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird that he's telling me that, but, you know, whatever. He said, yeah, the sale has been so successful that I've had to deliver mattresses for 15 consecutive days. I've had no days off for 15 days. I said, really? He goes, yeah, we've had 30 trucks delivering at least 17 mattresses a day for 15 straight days. And I thought, wow, that's a lot. And I said, Christine Cook must be happy. And he said, oh, Mrs. Cook, she's on the radio all the time, which is funny because that's what my article was about when I said I wanted to punch her in the face. Now, here's why I'm telling you this story. You've got Christine Cook, who probably takes a couple hours a month to go over and cut some new TV and radio ads. And I'm sure she's busy back at the corporate office, and I'm sure that things are going just fine for her. But when you walk into the store in Southlake, Texas, where I live, one of about 30 or 40 at this point, she's not in there. There's a picture of her in there. But the guy that works there, it's not him. There's operations manual. The store is laid out a certain way. The order happens a certain way. The delivery happens a certain way. Christine Cook's picture is on the side of that truck. And it's not a franchise. They own all the stores. It's not a franchise like McDonald's is a franchise. They own all the stores, but it's the business model that's franchised. And that's what Michael Gerber's book is trying to inspire you to do. Set up the business to be effective when you're not there. Set up your systems to service a large number of customers efficiently. For Christine Cook, I'm sure that requires having a large warehouse and an inventory management system and whatever it was, 30 trucks or something like that. How can you maximize time spent on doing things you really enjoy and minimize the amount of time spent doing things you hate? Okay, so this is what you need to think about in terms of the emails. Now, let's shift gears and let's talk for just a few minutes about the 4-hour work week. Now, this is a really interesting book. I recommend this book. I really like this book. This book is kind of like Napoleon Hill in the sense that Tim Ferriss, like Napoleon Hill, is part weird. He's just got some weird ways that he thinks. Not ways that I necessarily disagree with or don't like, but he just thinks in ways that most people don't think. And it's very interesting. He's really a rebel and a guy that kind of moves to the beat of his own drum or whatever you say. And he's an interesting guy, and he wrote this book that's basically saying, look, here's how you can work 4 hours a week and spend the rest of your time doing whatever the heck you want. And he spends quite a bit of time talking about, well, what should you do with your time if you're not working all the time? I don't want to get into too much of this, but I want to show you this list. He's got what he calls 2 different paths. One is called the deferred life plan, and the other is what he calls the new rich. And he's aspiring to be the new rich. And he talks about how the deferred life plan people, they want to work for themselves, but new rich want to have other people work for you. So instead of being the boss, you want to own the business. When you, if you're a deferred lifer, you work when you want to. The new rich put in minimum effort to maximize the results. The deferred lifer wants to retire early and then do nothing. The new rich wants to have regular breaks and do what they love doing all the time, from now until the time you die. Deferred lifers want to buy anything they want. They want to buy the Lamborghini or whatever. The new rich want to do all the things that they want to do and become what they want to be. Now, this is kind of getting out there a little bit, and I'm not saying, hey, believe this or do this, but it's just an interesting thought. But we're going to get into some of the actionable items here in a minute, but I wanted to just go over this with you very briefly. The deferred life people want to make a lot of money, and the new rich people want to have as much money as they need to chase whatever dreams they have. It's all about cash flow for the new rich, not about having money, okay? New rich want to have more quality and less clutter in their life. The deferred lifers want to get a big payoff through an IPO or some other means. The new rich want to think big, focus on getting a big payday every day, not at some time in the future. You know, it's an interesting, just pause here. I came very close to starting a business a couple years ago with a friend of mine, and it was a business actually in the home improvement industry. We were actually going to take this E-Myth franchise business model concept and start a certain type of business. I won't go into the details of what it was. But here's the interesting thing. I knew how to run this business, and I knew how to make this business work, but I didn't have the time or the effort to really make a go of it. So I thought if I'm going to run this business, I need to find a partner who has the ability to actually get out there on the front lines and run the thing. And there was a guy I know here through church that is a Harvard Business School graduate. He's made a ton of money. He's been very successful. Most recently, he helped a chain of dialysis clinics grow. I don't know what it was. I'm making these numbers up, but it was from something like 10 or 15 clinics to over 100, with the goal that they were going to sell out this company and make a ton of money. Well, long story short, they decided that they were going to sell out this company, make a ton of money, but they decided that this guy was expendable, and to lower their operating costs, they fired him so that they would look more attractive to a buyer, and he got canned. And he got a little bit of a what do you call it, severance and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, this guy ended up on the free market, being in his mid-40s, had made a lot of money in his career, extremely smart, Harvard Business School guy. And I said, well, hey, would you like to, you know, get into this business with me? And I'm thinking this guy is going to blow this thing out. Well, it was funny. Long story short, just I'll give you the end of the story first, then I'll tell you the part I want you to know. The end of the story is we didn't start the business because something else came up, and he got involved in another opportunity that was more aligned in the healthcare area that he had been in for his previous part of his career. But as we were exploring this business opportunity, he kept talking about the end game and the final result. And he kept saying things like, well, what's our exit strategy? And I didn't even know that word, exit strategy. I mean, I understand the words, I understand English, but for him it was all about exit strategy. He said, well, you know, if we build this to, you know, 50 locations, and each location's doing $2 million, then that's a $100 million business, and, you know, we can sell that to somebody for, you know, a multiple of earnings. And I was listening to all that, and I was thinking, okay, that's interesting. But I was thinking, man, if you were to build a business to 50 locations at $2 million per location, $100 million, how much stinking money would you be making? You'd be making money hand over fist. Who cares what the end result is? And it's just a different way of thinking. Not to minimize the fact that if you had a business like that, it would be worth a lot of money, you could sell it out. But I'm thinking, wow, why would you want to sell it out? Why wouldn't you want to just keep running it? What would be wrong with running that business for the next 20 years as long as you had capable managers running it for you? You didn't have to spend every waking hour babysitting it. But just a different way of thinking, the deferred lifer versus the new rich. The freedom from doing what you dislike. The new rich has the freedom and resolve to pursue dreams rather than working for the sake of working. Not only do you want to eliminate the bad, but you also want to experience the best things the world has to offer. And Tim Ferriss is all about traveling the world and doing things and, you know, exciting things and parachuting and all this kind of stuff that you might expect rich, glamorous people to do. And I'm sure that's great. Not really my thing. I kind of like having a house and living here, and I'm not really that big into travel. I like some travel. But that's not really the point. The point is just a little bit of a different way of thinking about it. But this is what I really want to talk about here is what he calls DEAL. It's called DEAL. It's a what do you call that? A acrostic. Definition, understand the rules and objections, elimination, do less to accomplish more, automation, putting systems to work, and liberation, run your business from anywhere. Now, I want to talk primarily about E and A. We'll talk briefly about D, definition. We'll talk a little bit about E and A, elimination and automation. I'll talk very briefly about liberation. But I want to sort of take the last few minutes of this webinar, this call, to discuss these particular issues, okay? So let's talk first about definition. Before you can attempt to become part of the new rich, you need to understand what the rules and objectives of this game are. In practice, this means you need to replace the conventional self-defeating assumptions with concepts that are aligned with the overall new rich lifestyle design. Okay, so here's a quote from Tim Ferriss. He says, people don't want to be millionaires. They want to experience what they believe only millionaires can buy. Ski chalets, butlers, and exotic travel often enter the picture. $1 million in the bank isn't the fantasy. The fantasy is the lifestyle of complete freedom that it supposedly allows. The question then is, how can you achieve a millionaire lifestyle of complete freedom without first having the $1 million? And then that's what that last slide I was talking about. So let me just give you 10 basic rules, according to Tim Ferriss, of pursuing the new rich lifestyle. I don't want to dwell on this. I think it's interesting. This is sort of a thing that I'm going to tell you to listen, take what you want out of it, leave what you're not interested in, and don't worry about it. And then I want to get to E and A, elimination and automation, because I think there's some really interesting points that are valuable for you there, okay? So first, these are the 10 rules of pursuing the new rich lifestyle. Think of retirement as a worst-case scenario, not the goal of your entire career. You should plan for retirement, have your savings and things like that, but those really are used for tax purposes in worst-case scenarios, not for some pie-in-the-sky day in the future when you can sit there and do nothing. Number two, remember interest and energy are cyclical. You should break periods of intense commercial activity with mini retirements where you go off and recharge your batteries. Work only when you'll be most effective, not when you're jaded and washed out. Number three, it's not lazy to do less work. And we're going to get to elimination, and this is a big key of elimination. If you're focusing on doing the most productive things, you find workable ways to spend less time in the office but actually achieve more. Focus more effort on being productive and less on being busy. Number four, the timing is never right to quit your job and start working for yourself, so plunge in now rather than waiting until all the planets are aligned. They never will. Number five, it's always more fun to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission, so take the plunge with enthusiasm. Number five, find ways to emphasize your strengths instead of trying to fix your weaknesses, focusing on your best tools, using your best tools wisely rather than attempting to repair what doesn't work. Number seven, remember that it's possible to have too much of a good thing, so plan on using free time wisely rather than sitting around doing nothing. 8, remember that money alone is rarely a solution. Never use it as a scapegoat. Never say, if I do that, if I had more money, create the lifestyle you want right now. Number 9, learn how to differentiate between absolute and relative income. Focus on making more money for each hour you choose to work. Absolute income is the number of dollars involved. Relative income combines how much you earn with how long it takes you to earn that money. As long as you have enough absolute income to cover your expenses, then think in terms of increasing your relative income, okay? And it's getting a little bit out there, but, whatever. Number 10, finally, take advantage of positive stress, what he calls eustress, eustress, the kind of stress that acts as a stimulus for worthwhile growth. Negative stress can be destructive and cause health problems. Positive stress helps you to realize your dreams can be helpful and beneficial. So seek that out. Now, here's what I want to talk about. According to my notes here, I want to talk about elimination. I think this is an area where we can all improve. Okay? So here's what he says for time management. Here's his first rule of time management. Forget about it. Don't think about time management. Here's what you want to do. Increase your per-hour results so you can achieve more in 2 hours than you did in prior 12 hours. To achieve this, here's what you need to do. Number 1, cultivate selective ignorance. Number 2, have a low information diet. Number 3, learn how to completely ignore unimportant things. Okay? Now, this all sounds kind of weird, but let's go to the next principle. He's got 2 principles that he uses here. One is called Pareto's Law, and this is the 80-20 rule, right? 80% of your outputs result from 20% of your inputs. And here's what he means by that. Analyze what you do and see which of the things you do makes an impact on your business. Now, I did this in 2010. Yeah, it was 2010. And as I looked at my daily schedule and I analyzed the things that I was doing, I found an inordinate number of things that if I just simply quit doing them, really nothing would happen, negative. Now, maybe that's true, maybe that's not, and we're going to talk about automation in a minute so you can get rid of some of the things that you're doing and have other people do them for you, or just eliminate them altogether. But look at what you're doing and think in terms of what actually needs to be done. Pareto's law, the 80-20 rule, and then there's another law that he calls Parkinson's law. Parkinson's law states, let me see, I got to read it here. A task will swell in importance and complexity in relation to the time allotted for its completion. In other words, the more time you have to do something, the more complicated you will make it and the longer it will take you to do it. If you've got 2 hours to get something done, you will get it done in about 2 hours. If you've got 2 weeks to get something done, you'll make it more complex, you'll worry about it more, and it'll take you 2 weeks to get it done. So what he's suggesting is if you use these two laws together and you identify the few critical tasks that contribute the most to your income and then schedule these to be completed with very short and very clear deadlines, this is how you maximize your time. You don't try to cram more in, you try to do less. And you give yourself less time to get them done so that you actually spend less time on it. Now, I'll give you a good example of this. Here's what I found in one of the critical tasks that I do. One of the critical tasks that I do is I write newsletter articles. If I have a month to write a newsletter article, it will take me a month. And I will stress over it, and I'll think about it, and it'll keep coming up, and I'll make notes, and I'll research, and I'll think, and I'll write, and I'll dabble, and I'll rewrite. And if the deadline is in an hour and a half, I can write the exact same article in an hour and a half. So here's what I've come to do. I've come to schedule specific times to start and finish writing articles. So instead of saying, and I'm talking specifically about articles that have deadlines like the ones that I write for Qualified Remodeler magazine. If I've got a deadline like I do right now of July 8th, I will start writing that article on about July 6th, and I'll give myself an hour and a half to do it. And it sounds risky, but it really is not risky. And you kind of have to kind of calibrate that and figure out what you can and can't do. But it's worked really well for me. So I'm going to ask you to look at what you do, look at what is necessary and what is not necessary, and eliminate the things that are not necessary. That's pretty simple. And then give yourself less time to do the things that are necessary. Okay. The next thing is what he calls cultivating selective ignorance. Feel good about the fact that you don't fill your mind with trivial and worthless information. Deliberately ignore anything which is irrelevant, unimportant, and unactionable on your part. Live by the creed, less is more. If you completely ignore any piece of information that is time-consuming, negative, irrelevant to your goals, or outside of your area of professional competence, just imagine how much time you'll save. And part and parcel with this is what he calls the low information diet, meaning no reading newspapers, no surfing the internet for news, no television except for 1 hour of pleasure viewing per day, no reading books except for a bit of fiction before bed. Now, that sounds really weird, but I'm going to tell you something. I've put this to the test for the last month, not because of this book, not because of reading, needing to prepare for this webinar, but because I wanted to see what would happen, and I'm telling you, it makes a huge difference. You cannot imagine until you start to really pay attention how much worthless information you allow yourself to consume. And you don't even realize it, and you don't even recognize it. Okay, so just think in terms of, do I really need this information? And if not, don't get it, and here's what you'll find. If you don't, that's going to force you to use that time to do something else, do something productive. Learn how to completely ignore unimportant by following a few simple guidelines. Number one, ignore any and all time wasters. Become a deliberate ignoramus. If something can be ignored with no negative consequences, do it enthusiastically. Check your email no more than twice a day. Delete as much of your email as possible. Have 2 phone numbers, one for standard calls, which automatically goes to voicemail, and the other number which is given out selectively to those who have urgent needs. When you return calls, get to the point immediately. Respond to voicemails by email. Do the same thing with meetings. If at all possible, ask to be excused and promise that you'll talk with a colleague to catch up with what was covered later. If that doesn't work, well, anyway, I'll stop there. Next, always batch your time consumers, which you have to do, because it will usually take the same amount of time to do a number of similar tasks. By batching, you share preparation time or execution time over a large number of tasks, creating better efficiencies. So if you have to do financial work in your business, do it once a week. And if you can do it only twice a month, do it twice a month. If you can do it only once a month, do it only once a month. Next, empower your colleagues to do anything which keeps your customers happy without you needing to check, without them needing to check from you. For example, you might establish a policy which says for any problems which cost less than $100 to fix, they should go ahead and do whatever it takes to fix that without checking with you. Then you outsource a large portion of email and phone calls that would come to you. So think in terms of empowerment, elimination, okay? Elimination, D-E-A-L. Define what you need to do, eliminate things that are unnecessary, and then moving on to A, automation. What we're talking about here is using other people to do things for you, whether it be a virtual assistant or a colleague or somebody that's more competent or more skilled at that particular issue. Now, we start getting a little bit into the discussion of the E-Myth here and the systems, right? So I'm going to let those two sort of come together here, and I'm not going to talk about automation a lot because we've talked about the systemization in the E-Myth, and that's kind of what we're going after here. Liberation, running your business from anywhere, can be accomplished when you've eliminated things, you know what you want, and you've automated it to a certain degree. But that's not really what I want to focus on for this call or this webinar today. So that's really what I want to talk to you about. I think in this E-Myth book, the concept of systemization and starting with the idea that you're going to build an entrepreneurial company with defined goals and systems in place to consistently deliver an efficient product that exceeds the customer's expectations, that's based on customer wants and needs, not what you personally want to do. That's the main point. And on the 4-hour work week, I really want to focus in on the elimination, making sure that you're doing the things that you need to be doing, not doing things that you don't need to be doing, and automating to the extent possible. So that's the message I have for you today. 2 really good books. I recommend them both. They're both pretty easy reads. The E-Myth is told sort of in the format of a parable. He talks about a woman named Sarah that started a bakery, and he keeps coming back to her story throughout his book. So he kind of tells the story and then gives you some philosophy to help understand how to deal with that part of the story. It's a quick and easy read. The 4-hour work week, this is a book that I highly recommend the audio book version because the narrator of the audio book does a superb job of portraying the image and attitude that I think the author really would want. It's a little bit condescending, but not quite. It's very authoritative, and it's an interesting read. I like to listen to a lot of books. I've got the hard copy of that book. I've read it a few times, and I've listened to the audio book probably 3 or 4 times. It's good stuff. So I recommend both of these highly. If you'd like to learn more about these concepts, then certainly the books are the places to turn. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and wrap up today, and we'll be back with you. Well, I'm not even sure. I'll have to check the calendar. You'll have to do the same thing, so we'll talk to you next time. Thanks so much. Bye now.